2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to Desire to Inspire Studios Foundation Donuts for Breakfast. My name is Trevor Henley and I'm over here with the mask. Thank you, California mask mandate. So we are repping accordingly this morning. I'm the executive director and founder of Desire to Inspire Studios. We have the brains of the operation with us, Ra Feasby, our operations director.
Hi, guys.
And I'm not going to screw it up this time like I did last week. We have with us Mark Dale.
Yep.
Yay! From RX Safe Marin. And welcome back. We had such a great conversation last week that I think blew both of our minds.
Yeah.
And a lot of unknowns, were kind of just discovered. And so we were really excited talking with you afterwards. And, here we are again this week.
So happy to have you back and continue this conversation.
I'm really excited to see where it's going to go. And also, I have a couple of scenarios that I'd like to run by you at some point. So when we're feeling awkward, I can do that.
You got it.
So, welcome back. One of the things that was a big thing for us and also of our show last week is, these shows are really about educating about what's unknown, right? It's about providing information and about giving people an opportunity to live through our experiences or just know that there's someone else out there that is going through what they've gone through or has gone through what they're about to go through.
Right.
And so I love how much was brought up last week that just kind of, I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought I know, of course I'm still a teenager and a 5-year-old in my mind, so I know everything, right? But one of the scenarios, maybe we'll start it off with this, is if I'm a parent and I have discovered that my kid is using something, what do I do? Where's information? Where do I start if I have no idea?
Well, it's really tough. I think that the hardest thing that I've discovered along the path here is that in this county, Marin County, we have two different worlds. So you have your HHS world, Health and Human Services. Okay. It's hundreds of millions of dollars are pumped into this machine that ultimately is meant to serve the underserved. And in Marin County, that's about 17%. Okay, so if you're middle to upper class, not underserved, not Medi-Cal, not in that arena, you have to go to your insurance companies and start a process with them. So I think when you first realize that your kid is doing something, a lot of parents make the misnomer, oh, my kid's just smoking some pot. I've heard that so many times, and that's from parents who've lost their kid.
Right.
Okay, so this is at their funeral or memorial service. All I knew my kid was doing was smoking some pot. Unfortunately, it was way beyond pot. And so it becomes one of these question marks of, are you really able to believe what you're seeing?
Right.
You don't want to, because you want to believe your kid.
Yeah.
Every parent wants to sit there and just believe their kid. But the reality is you start going through this process. Now, for a lot of parents in Marin County who do have drug experiences when they were younger, the playing field has changed tremendously.
That, I think, was the biggest revelation from our last one. It was like, this is not what it was like when I was...
Let's just take pot.
That was only 20 years ago.
Right?
THC levels.
Oh,
in
yeah.
joint are way beyond what they were back then.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's one. And then you have all the derivatives, dabs, wax, vapes, and edibles. So you've got this whole landscape out there around kids that's just THC cannabis. Now, the cannabis industry doesn't want you to have this conversation.
Right.
They want you to think everything's fine, no problem. No, when you're talking young minds, that teenage brain development, and they're getting hooked on a high power THC derivative, it can derail them terribly. Not only in their schoolwork and their friendships and their whole world shifts. Right. But then stepping into other things.
Right.
And a lot of people in this arena say, oh, no, pot's not a gateway.
Right.
Oh, no, when you got a kid who's died from an overdose and the parents backtrack, where did it start?
Right.
With a joint,
with the
pot.
harmless smoking of pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of cannabis industry, don't hurt our poor little plant.
Right.
It's medicinal. Well, the reality is pot industry is huge,
Right.
and they just keep on sucking more and more money. And do they really care about your kid's head? They really don't.
Right.
I haven't seen anything where they say, oh, we want to do a special program to protect our youth.
Right.
Well, that's the entry point. That's how they get their customers that'll stay on board for 5, 10, 20 years. You know.
Well, I mean, I know on the medicinal side, like it was a big thing for me at one point in my life. It helped me eat. It helped me calm my nerves to where I could eat because I had a bleeding ulcer at one point. But I also used it as an excuse, and it definitely was a gateway for me in that sense as well. So going back to what do you do as a parent when you discover this?
Okay,
I
so-
mean, what are the resources? How do you like? I just discovered it. What do I do? Who do I call? What do I?
So one of the great resources that I'll get to in a second is really important. I do want to say one thing.
Yeah.
If you are using medicinal marijuana properly, and come on, if you're terminally ill, or if you've got an illness that's affected you and you need something to help, yes,
Right.
by all means, you're an adult, make that decision. If it's
Right.
working for you, do it.
Right.
But a lot of kids don't have that decision-making ability.
Right.
They're sold a bill of goods that's BS.
Right.
So one of the game changers in our county in the last few years is we started mailing out, direct mail, a booklet to all 9th grade parents. And this last year it shifted to all 6th grade and 9th grade parents.
Good.
Because what's really important, those are the transition years.
Yeah.
And as we were doing the 9th grade parents, all these younger parents were like, hey, what about us? Because really, middle school,
Yeah.
you know, elementary school, not quite so much. Maybe in that
I
5th,
hope
6th
not.
grade.
Hopefully-
freaking hope
hopefully
not.
right? Had enough issues in grade school. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Elementary
But middle
school.
school, I watched
Yeah.
drug deals go down in the middle of blacktop
yeah.
at Davidson. Like,
Yeah.
Bingo. And I don't care if it's Davidson or Miller Creek.
Right.
yeah.
You know,
anywhere.
it is anywhere.
everywhere.
And you've got access points from siblings.
Yep.
Older friends, dealing through gang members, whatever it may be. So one of the cool books that we have out in Marin County is something called Let's Talk. And there's a website you could go to called letstalkmarin.org. And it's a booklet that was just regenerated in the last year. It came from a different kind of template we were using, but it was really designed to address Marin County's issues. And along with this booklet comes a whole education program that there's a series of different talks. So if you go to the website, you can find these talks around the county that occur at different school sites that help support this book. And it's a pamphlet. And when it's direct mailed to each home, there's usually a letter from superintendent in it, and then usually little stuffer items. It might be on teen suicide, or it might be on vaping, or something else is usually plugged in there. So it's meant to help get that school year off on the right footing.
Right.
And then the support behind it. So another thing, if you're a parent who's in trouble, don't stay quiet.
Right.
You'd be amazed how many other parents are struggling with this. There's a parent Al-Anon meeting that's at across from Mill Valley Middle School. There's a beautiful complex. I think it's Baptist, but it's a church complex that's across from the middle school. Saturday mornings, 10:30 a.m. On average, there's 200 to 250 parents in that room.
Wow.
And if you just sit and listen,
Right.
you'll get a tremendous education. But one of the sobering items that comes out of that is parents find rest finally when their child is in jail because their kid is not out on the street.
Right. The fear is gone.
Oh my
They know
God.
where their kid is. They know their kid is safe.
Yeah, safe enough.
Safe
In
enough.
and you know, to turn on that one a second, I think I mentioned last week, Dr. David Smith, who's the grandfather who's credited with starting the Haight-Ashbury Clinic, he says, you know what, all my decades of doing this, people don't turn around until they face consequences.
Right.
Right.
So once you're facing jail time or
Right.
you're facing something like that,
Right.
it's real.
Right.
It's in your face. So I think that in our case, we were really lucky because we had some people around us saying, look, you know, your son is 14 right now. You have up until 18. 18 in a day. When he turns 18,
Yeah.
game
Right.
changes.
Right.
As
Yeah.
a parent, you don't have really legal control over your kid anymore at that point. So we got a running start. We had a lot of people around us who really cared about us and said, you know what? And they kept on giving us advice. And so it's been a hell of a battle,
Yeah.
you know, but you know, it's never fully over.
Right.
You hope and pray that, you know, everything's good and you got forward movement. But going back to parents again, it's just really looking at the signals, listening. And if you've got counselors at school or teachers at school saying, you know what, grades are dropping. There's no good reason for this. But that's one of the first indicators of a student. Their grades are going through the floor because they're busy dabbling with the crap around them.
Right.
You know.
So a resource for parents, like you said, is an Al-Anon meeting in Mill Valley every Saturday morning, which is awesome. And then the other one, I mean, is reaching out to your friends, right? Your other parents. What about conversation with the student at that point? How does...
You know, it's a tough one to have. A person who used to be involved at the county level with the substance abuse in this county, I saw him do a presentation before he shifted over to San Francisco County. And he said the time to talk to your kid is not when they're drunk or stoned.
Right.
It really is not. You're not going to get the brain cell reception there.
Right.
The time to really sit down and talk is when they appear to be sober. Over food is usually great. Let's go out and get a pizza, or let's go out and get a hamburger. And you start this conversation. And I think that with all three of my kids, there was a magic point where I said, what kind of relationship do you want to have with me?
Right.
I just had that conversation with my son.
Which is really important. There's a certain point, because in their world, it's all about them. So at a point, you got to flip it and say, hey, look, what kind of, think about it.
Right.
So it helps them get in that space. But again, it goes back to that child and what's out there that can harm them right now is at such a level that they can lose their life, literally.
Yeah, to dabbling.
Yeah, and recreational, everybody experiments. This is stuff that you hear, but the game has changed.
Right.
And so, you know, the high-level THC products, and then you've got what it could be, pot with, it used to be PCP or cocaine, Chewies, Cocoa Puffs, things like that.
Yep.
Now it's a joint laced with fentanyl.
Right.
It can take you down too.
Oh, why? Why fentanyl? Like, what is...
I know.
That's
it's
so
just beyond me how
awful.
fentanyl just keeps going.
It's everywhere. I don't
and then also
understand.
going back to last week we were talking about, like, back in my day it was no-dos, right? But they're caffeine pills, but now they're basically heroin in a pill.
Yeah.
What was that one again?
Well, you've got like Xanax laced with fentanyl.
Right.
And so I got to tell you, in my mind, part of this goes back to Midol. And do you guys remember what Midol was?
Let's go with no.
You might.
I know I
Midol?
do. I know I do.
Midol was I don't even know if it's still out there. It's a product for females.
Yeah.
Had to do with their cramps and their period, their menstrual cycle.
It's a pain reliever.
And so girls at school would share it. Oh, I'm feeling a little crampy. Oh, here. That transition, I mean, that's how easy it is. You know,
What is Midol?
Well, the reason why I go to Midol is because it's so innocuous that it's not abused. Okay,
Right.
It's meant to help pain relief on menstrual cycle. But it's that transfer point. Oh, here. Oh, here.
Right.
And so I know at school, what happens is, Thiz, for example, ecstasy loaded with meth. Oh, here, take this. It'll take the edge off. It'll make you feel better. Right. You know, so it's that kind of stuff. It's those kinds of lines. And what really gets tough as a parent is my kid going to believe me over
That part.
over their buddies,
Right.
or over that dealer who's at the school site who thinks they know it all? And there's so many websites available that you can go on and you become a pharmacist almost. You become a drug expert and you start looking this stuff up, MDMA, Molly.
Right.
You know, and so it just becomes this pea soup, and how your kid navigates it, I think it really goes back to the communication you have with your child. And how early is too early? It depends on your family dynamic.
Yeah.
But some parents never have the conversation,
Right.
and they lose their kid.
Yeah.
And it's also, you know, pregnancies. That used to be, and it still is prevalent. You know, it's like you try to talk to your sons and daughters in a different way about it. But, you know, don't get pregnant too young. You know, it can change your whole world. These kinds of things. But good parenting skills.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you have any thoughts, Ra, or questions that you wanted to bring to this today.
I had been thinking about it. I was excited. And then I got overwhelmed by all of the potential avenues and trains of thought. I guess because I have a 9-year-old, he'll be in 5th grade, so I'm like barricading my family in preparation for middle school. Like I'm starting to like really lay that groundwork. Like I said, I had that conversation, you know, what kind of relationship do you want to have with me? I don't think those exact words were what I said, but something very closely, like me conveying that what I would like for our relationship to be based on, and him reciprocating, like telling me what he thought that would look like from his perspective, which was, my kid's amazing. But I know that middle school is such a disruptive time period for youth, both mentally, both physically, socially. It's so jarring. And I know that a lot of shifting happens in peer groups during that period of time. How do you see that kind of, what is it, shell game affecting the mental health state? Like how bad is suicide rates at that age group? How bad is overdose and abuse at that age? I mean, high school, you have a little bit more freedom. You have a little bit more freedom to discover and.
Well, I'll hit high school real quick, and then we'll work backwards.
Yeah.
So in the high school world, freshman class, no matter if you're at a public or a private school, is kind of a protected year. A lot of times, the signaling for the upperclassmen is hands off. These are freshmen, you know, and so they're in a protected category. And they also get a pretty good drug education in 9th grade for the in the health class, basically with PE. So they're getting good education there. But as you go into that sophomore and junior year, those are the highest risk years. Senior year, kids are already looking, if they're going to college, they're looking toward college. If they're turning 18, they know that if they get in trouble over 18, the game changes. They're adult as opposed to adolescent minor. So it becomes one of those dividing lines. So that's more in your high school range. Middle school is a crazy period. There's no doubt about it. When you look at the change in body development, puberty, friend group, awkwardness, all of this stuff that gets loaded in during those middle school years, it's a huge change. And usually it's a change of school, it's a transition. And if your kid is struggling at all with something that might be undiagnosed or borderline something, or is just having trouble feeling comfortable in their own skin, it is a really tough arena.
So isn't that like 99.9% of the students at that age?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think but it could also be a very harsh, mean environment, too. I mean, girls, more than boys, I think, can be merciless with
it's real ugly.
You know, and if you've got anything that makes you different,
Right.
that makes you stand out from the pack, then all of a sudden they can chop you down.
Yeah.
And also in Marin County, you've got this really odd financial socioeconomic dynamic that's not cool either.
Nope.
Right.
And so people are trying to measure up and trying to this. But I think it goes back to the parents again, because so many parents in Marin County, they might be working their tail off trying to afford their big mortgage and trying to have that look of the perfect family. And I think what I was looking at from last week is I was thinking to myself, what are we going to talk about this week? And I really wanted to hit perfectionism as one of the points, because I learned really early on in our battle around our son, this is not perfect. Okay. And I was in a series of different meetings. And so what if you show up and your hair is not looking good, or you're not dressed? So what?
Right.
You know,
That's not the
because
point.
when you're faced with a life and death dynamic, it is like the playbook gets thrown out the window.
Yeah.
And so many families in their own way try to look perfect, try to measure up against other families,
Or
try
not
to
show vulnerability or weak, or life isn't perfect.
Right.
Right.
Or going to Tahoe, or driving the right car, or all this BS. Because what it boils down to is your kid is getting that information too, and how they're able to process it and handle it is really important. And then another problem is the influencer. Okay, so in this day and age of YouTube and Instagram and Snapchat, all this kind of social media, you hear about influencers and how important that influencer makes a lot of money, oddly enough. But in a school site, who's that one kid that can change your kid's world?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's all it takes. Just takes that one.
Yep.
And I've heard stories from other parents who successfully navigated it with their kids. They made their house the fun house. They made their pizza to invite the other kids over so that they're able to see who their kid is hanging out with and kind of get a measure and kind of say, okay. And, it's really a tough one for parents is if you see one of your kid's friends is struggling with something, do you go and talk to their parent? It's a tough one because the world of snitching, and I heard this early on, especially with girls, because girls will try to help their girlfriends who are cutting or, taking substances or promiscuous sex, whatever it may be. They're just saying, wow, she's blowing it. And so she wants to help her, but then all of a sudden she's tagged as a snitch. And one of the terms I heard early on, snitches get stitches. I'm like,
that is a test of time. That is
like,
old tried and true right there.
Wait a minute. This is school.
Old tried and true.
This is not a prison.
In all things, snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches.
I can't remember a period in my life where I didn't know that to be true.
And the fact is, though, if you've got one of your dear friends is harming herself, where's that line that you say, oh my God, I can't look the other way anymore? And it takes courage. It's something I think that should be applauded in many ways because you're not going in tattletaling. You're trying to help your friend.
And it is. I mean, I have been in situations on both sides of that. And, the people who are willing to step in, the girls who are willing to tell are, thanked. And, people who are the parents and the teachers and everything else, they're grateful. But that's not their world. They don't live in the adult world. They live in the world with the other kids who only know that so-and-so has been pulled out of school to deal with whatever issues. And it's that girl's fault. And now she's a pariah.
Yeah, I hear you. No.
I just had a friend do that. Their daughter said, was caring about their friend, wanted to help, tried talking to the friend, didn't work. Then at one point was like, I don't know what to do, and went to talk to adult, and exactly that situation. She's no longer friends with them. She's got ostracized, and
total pariah.
It's brutal.
And I hope down the line, people kind of realize, I mean, sometimes I have heard recovery on those stories where 2-3 years later, the friend who was in danger contacted the friend who helped her and said, you know what, I was a jerk. I blew it. And I think that it really is one of those measurements that you got to kind of look at because the fact of the matter is, I've heard it too many times, the parents get told the truth at the funeral. So that's a bit too late. If your kid has already ended their life through suicide or overdosed and you were not brought up to speed that your kid was in such a high danger zone, it really is tough. And I think that's again goes to having some honesty in not only in your relationship in your home, but in the community, because so much of this was hidden for so many years that the silence was really killing us. Because it's like, wait a minute, what? You're kidding me.
And I think one of the odd things about Marin is the isolation, like this faux community that appears to like, we've got potlucks and, posadas and mom groups and this and that and the other. But that like tribal, we're all raising these kids to be the best adults that they can be and we're all going to look out for each other as kids is something that didn't seem really prevalent when I was growing up. I was lucky in that the girls that I hung out with, their moms worked really hard to establish that. And I'm super selective now with who my kids spend time with because I need to have whoever's kids those parents are. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Words, relationships.
I need for them to be willing to make that to build that tribe with me. So I'm super, but in general, like it's this, oh, he's not my kid, he's not my problem. Like that kind of, like, if your kid comes to you and says one of their friends is struggling, that kid is now your kid. Like you need to powwow with your child, because that's how they're going to learn how to navigate those difficult situations as well. And I feel like a lot of times, at least what I saw outside of my circle, and my circle wasn't great by any stretch, but outside of my circle was you had these kids that were just like wandering, like parentless and rudderless. And you had, we had a friend who was essentially like on his own for all of his adolescence,
which is absurd.
We in our own, each in our own way, did whatever we could as at the exact same age as him to create whatever grounding we could to keep him stable.
Right.
Yeah. You hear a term, and this kind of goes back to the 60s and 70s, but permissive parenting.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think you guys might agree is that being a parent, you're not meant to be, we're not buds with your child. Where you could be, I think there's a relationship there that so many parents try to be friends, first and foremost, with their kid. And it's a hard thing for the kid to read, because I think what a kid needs is some boundaries. Is the signals of saying, hey, this is not cool, this is right, this is wrong.
Right.
Again, so many of the families I've worked with who lost their child, when you look at the memorial video of the kid's life, they had everything.
Right.
They had Tahoe, they had this, they had this, they had this, they had this. Something was missing. Something obviously was missing. And this goes back to the influencer. But one of the most important questions that I often get asked is, how many kids do drugs?
Tons. Lots. More than not.
Almost all of them?
Like more than not.
Okay.
Because that's a relative question. I mean, at what point?
So the best explanation I've heard and I've adopted is that in a school environment, you've got 30% generally don't. They just won't.
30% is a small number.
33.
better than
Let's
I
go
thought.
33.
I thought that's better than I was
So follow me on this. This is not perfect.
Okay.
This is not fully scientific,
Right.
but it's a good model to kind of. So 33 and a third percent don't. 33 and a third percent dabble, experiment. Maybe 33 and a third percent do. Okay. But I believe 100% of the kids are at risk. And this approaches it from more of a holistic idea. Okay, so not only could that grouping that does not, will not, won't.
Right.
Okay, so which one of those girls would be at a party that she has a drink and gets roofied? Okay, so that's one possibility. Another one is, how many of those kids on that terrible day, a buddy of theirs gives them a pill. Oh, try this, it'll make you feel better. And it turns out to be Xanax loaded with fentanyl.
Right.
Okay, so that's that magic group that for some reason doesn't.
Right.
Okay, that group that dabbles, they get into a risk component.
Right.
The group that does, oddly enough, a lot of those kids kind of think they know what they're doing, and they kind of say, oh, I'm not going to touch that. Don Carney, who is Marin County Youth Court and Youth Transforming Justice now, he shifted. He takes an inventory when the kids are with him, and it's kind of like, what's that line? What's that drug you won't touch? And it's a very interesting response he gets from the kids. But that's that higher risk grouping over here. But again, it goes back to 100% of the kids are at risk, because if you're not having that communication with them and that proper education with them, on that terrible day, something can really go desperately wrong.
Right.
And I think that's the reality of it.
100%. So, what's there to celebrate?
Resiliency.
Okay.
I think that's a very important word to understand. I mean, when you look at how hard it was for us as adults to navigate this pandemic to this point, it was a big one.
Yeah.
It really messes with you a little bit, because when we were in lockdown, you kind of lose reference points that affect your memory, that affect your time, reference to time, this kind of thing.
Yep.
So if you're a youth, you know how difficult it is to kind of figure that one out?
Yeah.
And the weirdest thing is this doggone phone is loaded with everything on the planet for our kids. And they're sitting there like, love, like, ooh, looks like she's having so much fun. I'm not.
Right.
So it becomes this kind of weird dynamic in the brain that they feel it's putting it right in their face.
Right.
That's not cool. So going back to what we have to celebrate, I think that Marin County has an incredibly robust AA community that is phenomenal for youth to gain in your 20s, then the older set, the sponsorship, working the steps, going through the program.
Yeah.
I support it wholeheartedly because I think what it comes down to is this lack of connection. And there is something that I do when I speak often. So if I could ask you guys to do this with me, if you don't mind. Take your hands, put it together. Okay, and what I want you to do is open your fingers and shift by one.
That feels awkward. Okay.
How does it feel?
Awkward.
Exactly. So when you were small, you started putting your hands together a certain way. And in your brain, this little pathway got deeper, deeper, deeper. Now, if you change it for the next 30 days, it'll feel more normal, never quite natural. Okay? And what's going on is that awkwardness, that's a lot of place where our kids reside. Peer pressure, that uncomfortable feeling. Ooh, I don't feel comfortable. So can I take something that's going to make me feel more comfortable? And so, but what's important here also is, what does this symbolize? When you put your hands together and it's comfortable, what does that feel like?
Feels like a hand hug. It's
Connection.
Connection.
Yeah, it's
Hand hug. I love it.
togetherness. Yeah.
It
It's
is.
like a hand
Yeah.
hug.
And actually, there's Johan Hari, I believe, does a great TED Talk on this. I don't know if you've ever seen it yet, but what you think you know about addiction is all wrong. And the core of his presentation is connection.
Yeah.
And it's that lack
heard
of
that.
connection.
Yep.
And it really is that lack of connection in your family. What kind of relationship do you have with your mom, with your dad, with your uncle, with your brothers and
yourself?
sisters?
How many touchstones?
Bingo, with
Yeah,
yourself.
With yourself. Yeah.
How many touchstones do you have?
Right.
How many different ways can you reroute to yourself? I think of it because that's also something that I've talked about with my kid is when he's making those connections that the people that he ties himself to should bring out his best self and not his worst self. They should make him feel good and aspire to be better. And if you come away from an interaction with somebody and that interaction doesn't make you feel good, that is not somebody that should be part of your network.
I love that. That's actually right on target.
It's huge. And I haven't seen that TED Talk, but I 100% believe that the root of addiction is lack of community. It's a lack of connection.
Yep.
And yeah.
Because you know how most people who are addicted die?
Alone.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Totally alone. And the despair, and a lot of addicts will hide and lie and cheat and just kind of hide everything away
Yeah.
until they're totally in this tiny little corner of the
Yeah.
room, wherever, and they've lost themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I think that, again, in this holidays, and the holidays are incredibly stressful for a lot of folks.
Oh yeah.
Because look, we're how many days right now until Christmas? We've got this
15,
ticking time
11,
bomb.
12,
Nine
9
days left.
something. I don't
we got
know.
9 days to go.
It's like
Okay.
in a week and a day or two.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, did I get a gift? Did I get a gift?
Yeah.
Did I go shopping?
Yeah.
And you get in this consumerism mode, but then getting together with family for the holidays
Right.
can be really stressful because the family dynamics is their BS. I think for parents, one of the most important things, going back to that again, is that if your child is struggling with something and you're not getting good communication from your child, if you don't feel that that relationship is really, you can't force it or press it right then, but hopefully you've got somebody else in your circle. It might be an aunt or an uncle. It might be a close, dear friend of yours that does have a good connection.
Right.
Because at that point, the kid is able to feel that they have a communication point
Right.
Yeah.
that is much different.
Yep.
And I think at the end of the day, what we all care about as parents is getting our kids into a healthy headspace and be able to live their best life.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to, we are in a really odd pond. This is the toxicity of this environment. And, you want to make everything look so perfect and beautiful.
I
And
really don't though.
but the fact is that why do you have so many, let me hit this way, supply and demand. Okay, so a lot of the work I've done over the years is about working with law enforcement, interdiction, trying to get the supply out of the community, because I believe that if you got less Xanax laced with fentanyl available, you're saving lives right there.
Right.
But there wouldn't be a whole supply side if there wasn't demand.
Right. Right.
Right.
So why is there so much demand
Right.
for this crap? And it really is that 18, 19, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. And when you look at that death data again, how many people just lose themselves?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and don't get me started on suicide.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother.
For next Thursday?
Yeah,
Thing for next Thursday? Excellent.
Well, and I think that goes back to, I was thinking this morning, I was like, we're, as human beings, we strive for that connection. That connection with another human being, whether it be ourselves, whether it be one or two people closely and deeply, whether it be 100 people, 1,000 or 100,000 people with a shared connection. We thrive off of that connection. And the pandemic has put basically a stop on that, or limitations on it, or you can't do this or you can't do that. And so it makes sense that there's like a lot of uprising about everything, like including the mask mandate, right? Because it's taking away my connection and to whatever degree. But I think that, going back to, again, just my story, and then also just, it's the drugs are missing. That's what fills that lack of connection, or the thought of the absence of the lack of connection. Like when again, when I was growing up, I didn't know who really, really loved me. I knew my parents did. I knew my parents loved me unconditionally, but I didn't know my other friends that actually cared for me until one day. It's like then something happened and I was like, oh my God, wait, I do have friends. They do like me. Wait, all these groups that I didn't think like me do like me. Holy cow, like, oh, and it was like mind-blowing for me, right? But I had already filled that void with pot. That was my escape. That was my safety, and so I think that it's just moving forward. I think these next coming weeks are, like we said, are hard for a lot of people. It's the emotional connections that we've either been avoiding or that are difficult. And,
If I could hit one thing, I think that what happened in our situation is that when we started getting in trouble and the escalation of the trouble around our son just kept on amping up, and it was like, where's the stops on this thing?
Right.
And literally, juvenile probation was involved in our world, and they were incredible. One person I love to shout out is Heather D'Amato. She just had such a professionalism and caring, and so as we started to lose our son further, it was throwing her too, because it's like, wait, we haven't seen this before.
Right.
And then it turned out other kids too were in this environment. So I think what happens is that our first 18 months of this journey, we did what most families do. Private family matter, circling the wagons around our son and our family, but our toolbox was empty.
Right.
We got to a place where we could not afford to not open our life up and say, hey, look. Once we did that, it was amazing how many people came out of the woodwork saying, us too.
Right.
That they were suffering alone too. And it was just a real eye-opener, because then it opened up this whole situation where people started bringing information forward. And then also the sexual predator side of the house, which was a real unexpected thing, because I was really looking more toward the drug side of the house. But there was a whole sexual predator dynamic that was happening at our school sites that people started bringing that information forward, because they didn't know where to go with it.
Right.
Because school administrators were not listening to it. Law enforcement, it's a hard one to report. And it's amazing how that whole arena started. But again, it came back to, once you open up your world, you'll never know who cares about you and who your friends are.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
And it goes again back to addiction. People who are stuck in that,
Insularness.
Yeah.
They're
they lose
off.
themselves.
Yeah.
My
Go for it, Ra. We probably got to wrap up soon. I'm sure
we
we're
do.
over.
So my dad my dad was an addict,
Okay.
and my entire life, and growing up with it, I found out when I was 10. I was sat down, it was discussed, and the confusion surrounding how functional of an addict he was threw me for years because I saw other people struggle and fall off and fall by the wayside and be completely consumed by it. But my very first experience with addiction was somebody who maintained a full-time job, used sick time to address his addiction, and we were an upper middle class family. And then my parents got divorced, and I watched what it looked like for an addict who lost all of their roots and all of their connections and the things that kept them stable and functional. And I was like, okay, same exact thing. It's still the same. It just looks different.
Yeah.
And I say that to say this. If you know somebody who is struggling, if somebody who you care about is having a hard time feeling connected to the world that they are living in, if you can't do anything else, you can make it a point to be there and be present. Call them, text them, go over to their house. Make sure that they don't forget that you are still there. Right. And that if you can't do anything else, you can make sure that that person remembers that they are not alone.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
I mean, the sign of the pandemic is stronger together, right?
Yep.
Like that's the thing. And we say there's so much more we can do together than we can ever do on our own. And I think that today's show has been a very good testament to the power of that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mark. Again, thank you very much for coming today. Great conversations.
I'm not done with you yet. We're gonna get through these holidays, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna tackle the youth suicide.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about that too.
It's a big one.
Very
I gotta
important.
tell you, it's oof.
So again, thinking these next few weeks, they are tough. They're tough, especially on our teenagers and our youth. So again, like Ross said, just be present for someone you love. Be present for someone you care about. Be present for someone you don't love or care about.
Be present. Be present. That person that you happen to like be at the bus stop with on the street. Man. And they felt the need to tell you their life story. You don't know, but you might have saved their life simply by listening.
Very much
and
so.
The biggest present you can give somebody oftentimes is just to be present.
Yep.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us today on Donuts for Breakfast. We really appreciate you being part of our community and the Remedy and being people helping people. Go out there, share your story, and be present. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Whole series. Kind of want to give you your own show, Mark.